Welcome to Flower Summit 2023. It's great to see so many people both physically present and also online. This morning, when I was looking at the sign-up sheet, I realized that we passed 500. So 500 people have signed up to attend this event, both physically and virtually. So thank you all for coming. My name is Nicholas Lane, and I'll be moderating today's proceedings. And I really want to give you sort of an overview before we kick things off. So the overview of Flower Summit is that it's actually more than 2x than the last year. And because it's 2x from last year, we divided it into 2 days. The first day is what we're looking at right now. It's the research day. It's going to have around 10 different talks from 80 institutions all around the world. So we have focused on it all the way from Korea. We have folks flown all the way from the East Coast. We've had so many people come from Europe and, of course, the UK, all come all the way here to present today research that they've built on top of the Flower framework so often. And this also, given that it's over 500 people, not only is about a celebration of Flower, but it's a celebration of federated learning in general. And it arguably is the largest federated learning conference ever held. We've already kicked off, actually. If you're a new person to federated learning in general, you would have seen at 10 a.m. there was the tutorial on federated learning to really introduce the subject to you. And that is one of just a number of tutorials that have got through the next few days. And so in today, you will be seeing a tutorial specifically on research. Tomorrow morning, there'll be a specific tutorial on industry use cases and how you can take a centralized model you might have in industry and federate those things. In the morning of tomorrow, you'll be able to go through the code bases that you have. You're trying to centralize and meet some of the Flower maintainers. So we have a large number of tutorials to go alongside these research talks. Also, with a summit of this kind, we're bound to be making a few announcements. And so spread throughout the 2 days will be a series of announcements of extension and new features that are coming to Flower in the preceding months. And sandwiched in between those announcements is a recension. So at the end of today, starting at 7:30, after you've heard a lot of information, you want to relax and start the networking with the best people at federated learning who are attending here. Then you can go to the Tivoli Park. It's a great place. It was a converted cinema overlooking the river. And you can network with each other. So it's a great way to sort of bridge the 2 days. But so that brings me to the first event for the Flower Summit. It's going to be the first of 2 different Flower platform updates. And it's going to be given by Daniel here, the co-creator of Flower. And so with that, I'm happy to hand over to him. But there's one final logistical announcement. And that is if you, throughout these talks, if you want to ask any questions, whether it's on YouTube, on Zoom, or in person, just raise your hand and we'll round robin getting questions from any of you. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Daniel.
Thank you, and also a very warm welcome from my side. It's great to see so many people from so many different places here in person, and obviously also online. Let's get started. Maybe one of the important trends that we're seeing in machine learning is that some of the advances that we're seeing, they start out as closed source models, but then very quickly the open source community is catching up. And then over time, actually, the time frame that it takes always goes down and down. Over time, these open source models pretty quickly overtake the closed source variants. We've seen this a lot happen in the LLM space, and it's quite an important trend to acknowledge. Our hypothesis is that the same is true for federated learning. Federated learning used to and still is a little bit more difficult to use than some other approaches. But the general direction that we're working towards is to make it easier and easier. And then the easier it gets, we will see, and we are already starting to see an explosion in adoption. And we witnessed this over the course of the last year it's incredible what happened since Flower Summit 2022. And from what we're seeing is that this trend will only continue to accelerate. We're in a situation today where the powerful models that we see, like the latest LLMs, for example, they are usually trained on public data. And compared to the amount of data that we have in the world, the amount of public data, the amount of centralized data is actually relatively small. What we are working towards with Flower and with federated learning in general is to make that unused data available to machine learning training. And then one can only imagine the kinds of models we can train once we have access to more data. Because still, we see some incredible demos in spaces like ChatGPT, for example. But then in other spaces, like healthcare, for example, it's still, the models are nowhere close because they're just lacking the amount of training data. And then continuing with the healthcare example, just to make this a little bit more concrete, is if you imagine you're a researcher in a hospital, then the data that you can work with usually is very concentrated in one region. Maybe you're lucky and there are two tourists, one from Brazil, one from South Korea, who visited the hospital once. Not so lucky for them, but lucky for you, you have a little bit more diverse data. But if you look at all the data in the world, it's a very, very different picture. And you can see that most of the data that would be very, very helpful for you to train models with less bias, you cannot access this data. So what we really want to have is, in our model training, we want to incorporate all of that data. But then what can we do about it? We can't buy more data because no one sells that kind of data. We can't share the data because it's really, it's located in those different hospitals. We can't centralize all of the data because it's heavily regulated under HIPAA and different kinds of regulations. But then can we maybe connect the data? Yes, in fact, we can. And probably obvious to most attendees today, but still important to highlight is federated learning is really that solution to allow us to access vastly more training data, much more diverse training data, and allow us to train better models. And with Flower, we're just on a mission to build that infrastructure because obviously once we have data in different places, globally distributed, we need very reliable infrastructure in order to run these trainings. So what we just saw was cross-silo federated learning, where different organizations are working together. There's also a different flavor called cross-device federated learning, where we are trying to incorporate mobile devices, different kinds of edge devices. A car could be another example. And really with Flower, we want to enable you to train models that on all kinds of data, no matter where that data is located. And then in order to do so, obviously you want to use all the tools you know in LOF already, ideally in a very transparent fashion, with Flower sort of almost going a little bit into the background, but you code your model in PyTorch and you log your trainings towards weights and biases. Now, for going from idea to production, there's several steps that are usually taken. So you start on the development on a single machine, then simulate these systems on a larger cluster of a larger compute cluster. Maybe also simulate it on the kinds of devices that it would run in the real world to understand the real hardware properties, and then eventually deploy this to production to a global fleet of devices. Today, in the research update, we are focusing on those first two stages because they are also overlapping the most with what researchers do day to day. Short update on the community. The gist is it's growing rapidly. We have 2.6K stars on GitHub, or surpassed them a while ago. We have 73 contributors, quite a big jump over last year's numbers. And then one thing that's often overlooked, but it's quite a treasure trove of information, is on GitHub alone, there are 841 projects that depend on Flower. So this is something that's in the side panel on GitHub. And if you go there, it's something I often recommend to people if they look for something. Hey, has anyone done X for Flower? this is really, really interesting to look at because there's so many projects that use Flower in very interesting ways. They add new strategies, they build new models and that kind of things. And then still the same as last year, the community is wonderfully distributed all across the globe, and we can see a very nice sample in person today here. Update on features. Where are we? What's going to come next? Flower baselines. We have 6 high-quality baselines implemented. So it's never been easier to take one of these baselines and then reproduce existing work, and also take it, customize it, and try out new approaches instead of starting all from scratch with the core framework APIs. The virtual client engine that you use by using Start Simulation has improved quite a bit. A lot of PRs went into it. I think taken together, this is quite a major improvement. A lot of small things, especially execution on GPUs. So it's a major improvement, but I can also tell you that we're not done here yet. I think there's quite a few things that we still want to make better and faster. And the first announcement is that on the roadmap, we have a next generation virtual client engine. And that we already have some prototypes, and those prototypes outperform everything we've seen so far, especially if you look at heterogeneous GPU setups, where a single machine maybe has different GPUs, or you have different machines with different GPUs. And that's one of the things that we're working on right now, but it'll still take a little bit of time until it's public, but it's very promising what we're seeing. Another one is the driver API. We've released this in Flower 1.0, and the little scientist emoji here is there to tell you 2 things. One, it's still experimental, so it can change, stuff can break. But 2, it's also great for researchers. Let me start with the caveats. It's under development, so the API might change a little bit. It's not fully documented yet. We don't give any stability guarantees, but it's a very powerful thing. It's a simple API, but it allows you to do program systems in a very granular way. So you have the single class. It's called a driver. You use it to connect to a running Flower server, and then you can ask that server for the nodes that are currently available, and then you can schedule task instructions for those nodes that are available, and ask the server for the results once they are available. So it's very low level, but it allows you to write completely custom loops, something that was difficult with the strategy API, and customize it heavily, build async FL in a very easy and nice way, and do a lot of other things more easily, much more fluent, for example, federated analytics. And then to give a more intuitive explanation, if you using the strategy, you ever felt, okay, this is not powerful enough, I can't do the things that I want to do pretty easily, well, now you have unlimited power. That's the driver API in a nutshell. That's driver API. It's available since 1.2 with quite big improvements in 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, and it's only going to get better over time, and it's going to be stable later this year. Other announcements, we have FedBuff is coming in the next version of Flower, the next release in 1.5. FedBuff is the most popular async FL approach, and we're using it to drive a few other under the hood improvements in Flower as well. You can use it in the next version of Flower. Another big announcement is fully programmable secure aggregation. And in the interest of time, we will share more about this tomorrow. And then finally, on the roadmap, we started to think about what could a strategy interface 2.0 look like. The strategy has been great, and it's pretty flexible for some things, but then other things like async FL or interleaving training and evaluation have been more difficult than it should be. And we are thinking about a way to fundamentally improve this with a new strategy abstraction. What else? Well, our roadmap is driven by the community. So if there's anything that is super high priority for you, but that's not included here, please open an issue on GitHub, create a proposal, ping us on Slack. There are many ways to reach us, and let us know about your requirements. There's also going to be another set of announcements tomorrow in the industry update, so also make sure to check that out. Now onto a more serious topic, but a very important one, especially to research. There's generally in machine learning research, there's a reproducibility crisis, and I think especially in federated learning, it's much more pronounced, because in federated learning, there's so many factors that that just make research results very difficult to reproduce. So there's the way you partition the data, the kinds of hyperparameters used. Often not all of these hyperparameters are fully specified. There are often intricate implementation details. So for example, in the Cambridge group, there's a lot of work comparing different machine learning, federated learning frameworks, and oftentimes to reproduce some published results, it's very difficult, and you have to even change parts of the implementation of some framework just to reproduce that result. Well, the result of that is it's a huge effort trying to reproduce those results, and it's even more difficult to build upon published results, which should be easy, should be the default in research, that you can take some result that someone else has built and then improve on it and easily iterate on it. So this reproducibility crisis, it really slows the progress that we have in federated learning as a research community as a whole. Which is why we are announcing the Summer of Reproducibility. It's an open community effort to create a collection of easily reproducible and easy to use open source baselines. And we really take this seriously, and we, as Flower, as a team, wants to support this both monetarily and also with resources from the team. So we are announcing a $100,000 award that we put to the side and reserved it especially for that topic. And this pot of money goes towards awarding contributors with up to $2,000 per baseline that they contribute to advance reproducible federated learning. So that's Summer of Reproducibility. It's a 3-month community sprint starting in July. We'll share a few more details later on. And I think the message is pretty clear. Get your baselines ready to contribute them. So on a first come, first serve basis. Yeah, we'll have more updates to share later on. Now, drum roll, please. We already have 2 baselines from outside contributors, and they're here. So, Pedro, would you like to come to the stage, please? So first of all, thank you for the contribution. The award goes to Pedro for his experiment on adaptive federated optimization, one of the first outside baseline contributions. And we should step in front of camera. And for that, here's your award. The second award goes to Tuan, who unfortunately couldn't be here today because of visa issues. Otherwise, he would have been here. And the award goes to him for his baseline on federated learning for ASR-based wave-to-wag. Maybe a round of applause for him as well. So that's the Flower research update. I think the big announcement is Summer of Reproducibility. We are taking reproducibility very seriously. We're making a $100,000 commitment to the research community to well, help us speed up. There's a lot of improvements in Flower under the hood, and more coming. And yeah, ready to take some questions now.
What kind of baselines are you looking for? Is there any particular type of baseline that you're looking for?
Yes. So the major guideline should be, it should be something not too exotic maybe. It should be something that's used ideally in a number of papers. So that that of course increases the value of the contribution and will prioritize such baselines in the review. And then there's different ways. We'll make more announcements about this both later today and then later in June with all the details how we think about this. But there will be ways to interact with us and to get some feedback before putting in the work, so that you can be sure that this is something that we are also interested in merging. And we'll publish all of those details later in June.
You said the sink is becoming like a first-class citizen, like in other words. Can you elaborate a bit on that? In Flower, what do you mean?
Yes, so there's two different ways in which async can be used. So the first way is going to be with the new FedBuff strategy that is coming in the next release. And then with the FedBuff strategy, we're using the experience to design a new strategy API, one that makes it very easy to build this. And then if you want to use it now immediately, you could also do one other thing, which is just to use the driver API. That's the most flexible approach. You can build pretty much any federated learning approach using the driver API. But if you want something where you just say, okay, I want to try async, then the FedBuff strategy is the best way to do it.
Plans to explore decentralized federated learning?
We're looking at it. There's nothing that we're going to do immediately, probably. With the new driver API, it's more flexible, so you can more easily build other kinds of approaches, like decentralized. But it's not the most immediate thing that we have on the roadmap.
It's a message from the other award winner. I would like to express my gratitude to Flower Team. It's my great honor to receive the prize. Wish you I was there in person. Wish Flower Team and everyone have a wonderful summit.
Wonderful, thank you. A big thank you from our side for advancing reproducible federated learning.
There's actually one more question from Adi Paramarth. Hello, thank you for the information. Is there any specific coding style required for submitting the baseline? Thank you.
We'll share details about this in June, but the general guideline is take a look at the existing baselines. They're sort of a blueprint for how things should look. We're still in clarifying some of those details, so there might be minor tweaks, but as long as it looks roughly like the existing baselines, there's a good chance of it being what we expect it to be.
There's one more question from Anonymous. Are the transitions between new versions of Flower going to be frictionless, or should we expect to have to rewrite to implement newer features?
The transitions between different Flower versions, since 1.0, we did not make any breaking changes, so it should be seamless. We're going to continue like that. For the new driver API to use, we'll still support the old way of running things, but there will be new functionality that needs to be used in a different way. But we're not expecting any breaking changes.
Oh. Okay, let's make this the last question.
So the question is, could you explain what would be the added value of FedBuff?
Yes, the added value of FedBuff is, well, there are multiple added values, usually convergence. Well, first of all, I highly encourage you to read the paper. But in FedBuff, usually convergence is faster. It's easier to deal with stragglers and dropouts, that clients dropping out during the thing. So those are just some of the advances that async FL brings to the table.